A shocking new claim has surfaced in the disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, and it may point to a motive that changes everything. So, according to a report from Hindustan Times, Annie Guthrie allegedly asked her mother for a loan shortly before Nancy vanished from her Tucson home on February 1st. And reportedly, Nancy said no.
One word. That is all it took. Not a fight, not a threat, not a slammed door or raised voice. Just one word. Spoken quietly by an 84-year-old woman sitting in her own home, exercising the one right nobody could take from her yet. The right to say no. And 3 months into one of the most closely watched missing persons cases in the United States, that word has finally surfaced. A new report has landed in the middle of this investigation like a stone dropped into still water. And the ripples it is sending out are reaching every corner of this case in ways that cannot be ignored. Nancy Guthrie said no. She said no to her daughter. She said no to a loan request. She said no sometime in the weeks before January 31, 2026. And 2 weeks after that word left her mouth, she was gone. A publication called Hotline Times reported that Annie Guthrie asked her mother for a loan in the period leading up to Nancy's disappearance. Nancy refused. That report has not been confirmed by law enforcement. It has not been denied by the family. It has not been addressed publicly by anyone with direct knowledge of that conversation. But it landed exactly where it needed to land. In the middle of a case that, for 3 full months, had evidence and timelines and forensic details and sealed recordings, but did not have one thing that every investigation needs before it can move forward. A reason, not a theory, not a guess pulled from a comment section. A documented, sequenced, reportable financial picture that places 2 people, a mother and a daughter, on opposite sides of a money conversation just weeks before one of them vanished. This changes the shape of the entire case. Because up until this report, the question that kept circling without an answer was why. Why Nancy? Why that night? Why that level of planning? Why did someone go to such lengths?
Now, let's be very clear here. Annie has been formally cleared by law enforcement, but in a case where nearly 3 months have passed with no arrest, no named suspect, and a mother still missing, this kind of detail doesn't just disappear into the background. It goes straight into the public consciousness, and the internet, as you might expect, has a lot to say about it.
Why was an 84-year-old woman, living alone in a quiet Tucson neighborhood, the target of whatever happened on the night of February 1st? The loan refusal does not answer every question, but it answers that one. And once that question has an answer, everything else in this case begins to line up in a way that is very hard to look away from. Hi viewers, before this goes any further, a quick question for everyone watching right now. When you first heard about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, did you immediately suspect someone close to her was involved, or did you think it was a stranger? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Now, before the money. Before the documents and the timelines and the sealed recordings, there is something that needs to be said first. Something that gets lost every single time a case like this turns into headlines and theories and comment sections and viral posts. Nancy Guthrie is a person. She is 84 years old. She is a mother. She is a grandmother. She is a woman of faith who attended church every single Sunday morning without fail. The kind of woman whose absence from a Sunday morning live stream was what finally triggered the alarm that something had gone terribly wrong. She raised her children largely on her own. She worked. She sacrificed. She built a life from the ground up, and she built it in Tucson, Arizona, in the Catalina foothills, in a beautiful home she had lived in for decades. That home is worth approximately $1 million.
And the Pima County Sheriff's Department officially stated that Nancy was believed to have been taken from her home against her will, possibly in the middle of the night. Now, here's where the financial angle starts to take shape and predates the loan claim entirely. Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills is valued at around $1 million.
It is filled with the memories of a long life. A garden she tended herself. A porch she sat on. A church she walked into every week. She kept to herself. She never wanted to be famous. She never asked to be at the center of anything. She had a pacemaker helping regulate her heart. She took medication every night at 10 o'clock, medication the county sheriff himself publicly noted could have serious consequences if missed. She wore hearing aids that she removed every night before she went to sleep, which meant that once those aids came out, she was completely unable to hear anything happening around her. The family dog had died. There was no replacement. The camera system outside her home was not actively recording because the subscription had lapsed. No alarm system, no medical alert pendant, no overnight caregiver, no one. An 84-year-old woman. $1 million home. Zero protection. That is who Nancy Guthrie was on the night she disappeared. That is the woman at the center of this story. And the story of what may have led to her disappearance does not begin on January 31, 2026. It does not begin with a dinner or a drive home or a doorbell camera going dark in the middle of the night. It begins 8 months earlier. It begins with a document. It begins with a signature. And it begins with a financial thread that, once you see it pulled from beginning to end, does not look like coincidence.
Investigators and online sleuths alike have focused on this gap, suggesting it could indicate motive or opportunity. An unverified document appeared online, reportedly showing that Tommaso signed a durable power of attorney, granting Annie control over his financial and property affairs back in May of 2025, 8 months before Nancy's disappearance. Legal experts have been quick to note that
it looks like a plan. And that plan, if the evidence is telling the truth, started long before Nancy Guthrie ever had the chance to say no. In May of 2025, 8 months before Nancy Guthrie vanished, a document was signed. Not a will, not a deed, a durable power of attorney. Tommaso Cion signed it, and that document named his wife, Annie Guthrie, as his agent over financial and property matters. When it surfaced publicly, people with legal backgrounds were quick to offer explanations. Routine paperwork, they said. Standard procedure for a mortgage refinance or a property transfer. Completely normal. Nothing to see here. Maybe that is exactly what it was. But here is what those explanations left out. They looked at the document in isolation. They did not look at what came before it and what came after it. Because when that power of attorney is placed inside the sequence of everything that followed, it stops looking routine. It starts looking like the first move. May 2025. The document is signed. Sometime before January 31, 2026. Annie reportedly asks her mother Nancy for a loan. Nancy says no. January 31, 2026. Nancy has dinner at Annie and Tommaso's home. February 1, 2026. Nancy is gone. That is the sequence. 4 points on a straight line. And that line has a direction. The direction is financial. Now, precision matters here. The loan claim comes from a publication called Heian Times. The amount of the loan request is unknown. The reason Annie reportedly needed the money is unknown. The exact date of that conversation is unknown. Law enforcement has not confirmed it. The family has not addressed it. It has not been denied. What is known is this. The claim did not create a new story. It gave an existing story something it had been missing for 3 months. A starting point, a motive. A reason why Nancy Guthrie specifically, why that home, why that level of planning, why an 84-year-old woman living alone in the Catalina foothills became the center of a federal investigation. And that reason is sitting in the gap between two properties. Nancy Guthrie's home in the Catalina foothills is valued at approximately $1 million. Public record, anyone can look it up. It sits in one of the most desirable residential neighborhoods in all of Tucson, a home Nancy had lived in for decades. A home that represented the accumulated weight of an entire lifetime of sacrifice and hard work. Annie and Tommaso's home is approximately 4 miles away. Estimated value, around $650,000. That is a $350,000 gap between the mother's home and the home of the daughter who lived nearest to her. On its own, that gap means nothing at all. Parents often have more than their children. That is completely ordinary. But when the question being asked is why would someone target this specific woman, the value of what Nancy owned becomes one of the most important numbers in this entire case. Think about what that number represents. $1 million home, no mortgage recorded on it at the time of her disappearance. An 84-year-old woman with no overnight protection, no alarm system, no active camera subscription, and a daughter who had reportedly just been told no when she asked for financial help. The asset sitting inside Nancy's address was not invisible to the people who knew her. It was the most visible thing about her financial life. And access to that asset, full, uncontested access, becomes possible the moment Nancy is no longer present to protect it. That is not a theory. That is how financial crimes against elderly people work. The research on elder financial exploitation is clear and consistent. The most common perpetrators are not strangers. They are not random. They are people inside the circle. People who know the routines. People who know the vulnerabilities. People who know that the medication comes out at 10 o'clock and the hearing aids come out right after, and the camera stopped recording months ago because nobody renewed the subscription.
Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer went on a live stream and directly addressed the theory that Annie and Tommaso were involved for financial reasons, saying, quote, "This is a woman who works hard, no signs of money problems. They do just fine. They're not in any money problems. They have one child. They have a beautiful life from all accounts," end quote. Coffindaffer also...
And here is the part that has been sitting in this case from the very beginning, quiet and largely unaddressed until now. Not one of Nancy's protections was expensive. A camera subscription costs roughly $15 a month. A medical alert pendant runs less than $1 a day. An overnight caregiver through a home health agency in Tucson costs a few $100s a week. These are not extraordinary measures. These are the basic, standard precautions that families with elderly parents living alone put in place as a matter of course. The Guthrie family had the financial resources to cover every single one of those safeguards. Savannah Guthrie is one of the highest paid broadcast journalists in the United States. The combined income across the family was more than sufficient to make one phone call and one credit card payment and ensure that Nancy Guthrie was never alone and never unreachable. None of it was done. And if Annie was in a financial position where she needed to ask her 84-year-old mother for a loan and was refused, then the question of why nobody arranged basic protections for Nancy takes on a completely different weight. It stops looking like an oversight. It starts looking like a choice. A deliberate, sustained choice that left Nancy Guthrie completely exposed on the night someone came for her. The power of attorney, the loan refusal, the property gap, 3 separate threads, and every single one of them leads to the same dinner table on January 31st. The last meal Nancy Guthrie ever had with her family. Now walk through that evening. Walk through it slowly, because this time, every detail looks different. At 5:32 in the afternoon on January 31st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie requested an Uber from her residence. The driver picked her up and took her to Annie and Tommaso's home for dinner and games. That ride is fully documented. Timestamps, driver cooperation, everything on the record. Nothing unusual, just an elderly woman going to her daughter's house for a family evening. But think about what was sitting at that dinner table. Sometime in the weeks before that night, a conversation had taken place. A daughter had asked her mother for money. The mother had said no. That word had been spoken. It was out in the world now, living between them. And now they were sitting across from each other, passing food, playing games, filling the room with the ordinary sounds of a family evening. Was it warm? Was there tension under the surface? Did anyone bring it up again? Nobody knows. What is known is that after dinner, after the games, after whatever version of a normal evening that was, Nancy Guthrie got ready to go home. And the man who drove her was the husband of the daughter she had refused. At approximately 9:50 in the evening, Tommaso Cion drove Nancy home. 4 miles, about 10 minutes, and completely undocumented. No third-party camera recorded the departure from Annie and Tommaso's driveway. No rideshare app generated a timestamp. No neighbor witnessed the arrival at Nancy's home. Tommaso's account is that he walked Nancy inside. He says he watched the garage door seal behind her. He says he left. That account stands completely alone. There is no independent corroboration from any source. Not a single camera, not a single neighbor, not a single piece of data that confirms or contradicts what Tommaso says happened in those final minutes. The last person to see Nancy Guthrie alive was the husband of the daughter who had been refused. And his version of those 10 minutes is the only version that exists. In any serious investigation, that account does not get accepted at face value. It gets examined. The FBI examined it. They examined it for 40 days. From the moment that garage door closed behind Nancy at approximately 9:50 on the night of January 31st, to the moment Annie called 911 the following afternoon at 12:03, 14 hours and 13 minutes passed. 14 hours. And during every single one of those hours, nobody from that household made contact with Nancy. No call, no text, no drive-by, nothing. Nancy was 84 years old. She had a pacemaker. She needed medication at 10 o'clock that the sheriff himself publicly described as critical. She was about to remove her hearing aids and become completely unreachable by sound. She was alone in a house with no alarm, no active cameras, no medical alert pendant, and no caregiver. The people who drove her home knew every single one of those facts. And they said nothing.
All of it feeds a narrative that has captured the internet's attention. But here's the critical word: theory. None of this has been confirmed. Annie and Tommaso have been cleared, and as the FBI forensics work gets underway, the real answer may have nothing to do with the family at all. There could be a stranger, a professional criminal, someone with access and intent.
In families where an elderly parent is living alone, the goodnight call is not extraordinary. It is automatic. A 3-second text. Home safe. Love you. The kind of small act that exists not as an obligation but as a reflection of care. That ritual was completely absent on the night of January 31st Street. Its absence created something very specific. A window. A clean, uninterrupted, 14-hour window where the only mechanism for detecting that something had gone wrong was a church friend who noticed an empty chair the following morning on a Sunday live stream. That is not the window of a family waiting to hear from their mother. That is the window of a family that already knew they would not be hearing from her. At 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, the doorbell camera at Nancy's home captured a masked figure. Then the camera went dark. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker lost its connection with the home monitoring unit. She had been moved. Her heart was still beating. Wherever she was being taken, she was alive. But the connection was gone. The monitoring unit registered the loss and logged the timestamp. 2:28 in the morning, the precise moment Nancy Guthrie left the reach of the only device that had been tracking her. And for the next 9 hours and 35 minutes, before Annie picked up the phone to call 911, the world went completely silent around her. Nancy's pacemaker went dark at 2:28 in the morning. Somewhere between that moment and noon the next day, her daughter called 911. But here is what nobody has been allowed to hear. What Annie actually said when she picked up that phone. And a retired detective says the reason that call is still sealed will only make sense when a trial date is set. Annie Guthrie arrived at her mother's home at 11:56 in the morning on February 1st, 2026. She called 911 at 12:03. 7 minutes passed between arriving at the home of a missing 84-year-old woman and picking up the phone to call for help. 7 minutes. If she found evidence of a disturbance within the first minute of arriving, and the evidence visible at the scene was in a location that would have been difficult to miss, then 6 minutes passed between seeing something alarming and making that call. What happened in those 6 minutes? Did she search the house? Did she call someone first? Did she stand in the driveway and collect herself? Did she already know what she was going to say? The 911 recording almost certainly captures what immediately preceded and surrounded that call. Background sounds. Other voices, if any, were present. The emotional register of the caller. The specific details she chose to describe first and the specific details she left out. All of it is locked away. In Arizona, 911 recordings are public records. Journalists can legally request them. In virtually every high-profile missing persons case, the recording surfaces within days of the initial report. 3 months into this investigation, not one person outside of law enforcement has heard a single second of what Annie said. Retired Detective Bob Gilliam addressed this directly on the Interview Room podcast hosted by Chris McDonough. He said there is almost certainly investigative information on that recording that detectives do not want the public to have access to. He said not to hold your breath waiting for it. And then he said the one thing that reframes the entire case in a single sentence. He said that call might not surface until a trial date approaches. A trial. That word is doing enormous work. A trial implies charges. Charges imply an arrest. An arrest implies that the trajectory of this investigation, despite months of apparent public silence, leads to a courtroom. And the 911 call is being preserved not as a document of a grieving daughter reporting her mother missing, but as evidence for a legal proceeding. Bob Gilliam also raised a question about that call that cuts even deeper. He asked what Annie described when she made it. Did she mention the specific evidence at the scene immediately? Did she describe the open back door? The flower pot propping it open? Did she volunteer details about the scene with a level of specificity that a person arriving at that location for the first time, with no prior knowledge, would not yet have had the ability to report? In cases where someone connected to a victim is also connected to what happened, trained investigators listen to 911 calls for one specific category of information. Details the caller should not yet know. If Annie described that scene with knowledge that exceeded what fresh eyes could have observed in 7 minutes, that is exactly the kind of information that gets a 911 call sealed. That is what a retired detective means when he says it will not be released until a courtroom is ready for it. Now consider the car. Annie Guthrie drives a Honda CR-V. The FBI seized it. They held it for over 40 days. 40 days is not a routine processing window for the vehicle of a person who has been publicly characterized as cooperative. A standard forensic sweep of a witness vehicle takes hours. 2 days at the outside. 40 days means the forensic team encountered something that required extended, detailed analysis. Or the data pulled from the vehicle's onboard systems did not immediately align with the account investigators had been given. Modern vehicles are not passive machines. They record everything. GPS routes logged with precision. Door open and close events, each one timestamped. Speed, engine activity. Every function the vehicle performs is stored in its onboard system with a timestamp attached. If the story is that Tommaso drove Nancy home and returned directly, the car's telemetric data should have confirmed that account within 48 hours. 40 days means the data required a much longer conversation. 40 days means investigators were not satisfied on day 1, or day 5, or day 15. Something in that car needed to be fully understood before it was returned. And the FBI has said nothing publicly about what those 40 days produced. That silence is not neutral. Then there is the hair. A rootless hair sample was recovered from inside Nancy's home. Rootless samples are among the most difficult biological materials to analyze because they do not readily yield the cellular material needed for standard DNA profiling. This sample was sent to 2 separate facilities: the FBI's laboratory at Quantico, Virginia, and Australa Forensics in San Francisco, the same laboratory that contributed to the conviction of the Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann. Forensic genealogist C.C. Moore is involved in the analysis. C.C. Moore has resolved cases that sat cold for decades using degraded biological material and public genealogy databases. Her involvement signals that investigators are committed to identifying whoever left that hair in Nancy's home, and that they believe it is possible. The first search of the Cody's database came back with no match. No match means whoever left that hair in Nancy Guthrie's home has never been arrested. No prior record, no prior convictions. A clean history by every official measure. That result eliminates the possibility of a career criminal or random opportunist. It describes someone living an ordinary life. Someone who appears, on paper, to have no history of anything. Someone who attends family dinners. Someone who drives elderly women home at night. Someone who signs powers of attorney and sits across from mothers who have just said no. And then there is Cameron. Nancy Guthrie has a son. His name is Cameron. He is Nancy's child, Annie's brother, Savannah's brother. In 3 months of one of the most covered missing persons cases in American history, Cameron has not made a single public statement. No press conference appearance. No social media post. No interview. Not one word in any public forum about his missing mother. Savannah has been visible, understandably given her public profile. Annie has been present in the public narrative. Cameron does not exist in this story. In missing persons investigations, when a family member is completely absent from the public record for months, that absence is never random. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is legal counsel advising silence. And sometimes it means something else entirely. Cameron's silence is not evidence of anything by itself. But it is a question this investigation has not answered. And in a case built on questions that refuse to go away, one more unanswered question is not a small thing. The DNA profile being built in that laboratory right now describes someone with no criminal record. Someone living an ordinary life. Someone who may have sat at that dinner table on January 31st and driven an 84-year-old woman home in the dark. The lab is still working. The profile is getting closer to a name. Now stack the full sequence one final time. From the beginning, all the way through, without stopping. May 2025. A durable power of attorney is signed. Tommaso gives Annie authority over his financial and property affairs. 8 months before Nancy disappears. Sometime before January 31, 2026. Annie reportedly asks Nancy for a loan. Nancy says no. That word becomes the starting point of everything that follows. January 31st, 5:32 in the afternoon. Nancy takes a documented Uber to Annie and Tommaso's home for dinner. January 31st, approximately 9:50 in the evening. Tommaso drives Nancy home. No camera, no witness, no independent record, just his account. 9:50 in the evening to 12:03 the following afternoon. 14 hours and 13 minutes. No call, no text, no visit. From the people who live 4 miles away and knew she was alone, medicated, and completely unreachable by sound. February 1st, 1:47 in the morning. A masked figure is captured on the doorbell camera. The camera goes dark. February 1st, 2:28 in the morning. Nancy's pacemaker loses its connection to the home monitoring unit. She has been moved. Her heart is still beating. She is alive. February 1st, 12:03 in the afternoon. Annie calls 911. The call is sealed. A retired detective says it will not be released until a trial date is set. February through March. Annie's Honda CR-V is seized and held for over 40 days. Submitted to forensic analysis that far exceeded standard processing time. The FBI has said nothing about what they found. April 2026. Photographs surface showing people removing boxes from Nancy's home. Annie's vehicle is visible. Nancy has not been declared deceased. No probate proceeding has been initiated. No court has authorized anyone to remove anything from the home of a woman whose disappearance is still an active federal criminal investigation. And yet the boxes were leaving. May 2026. Reports emerge that someone is planning to move into Nancy Guthrie's residence. A $1 million home. The home of a woman who is still missing. The home of a woman whose daughter was reportedly refused a loan just weeks before she vanished. Every item in that sequence has a version that means nothing. A power of attorney can be routine. A dinner can be just a dinner. A gap in phone calls can be an oversight. Boxes can be moved for preservation. Each piece, looked at alone, can be dismissed. But here is the truth about sequences. They are not meant to be looked at alone. When every innocent explanation requires ignoring what came before it and what comes after it, those explanations stop being the most likely ones. They become the ones that require the most work to believe. NBC News built a specific protocol for this case. If breaking news about Nancy Guthrie surfaces during a live broadcast, Savannah is removed from the set. A different anchor handles the story on camera. The information is delivered to Savannah privately. That protocol was activated on April 15th. Savannah was pulled mid-broadcast after teasing a segment. She returned later without explanation. 2 days after that, she was absent entirely. Networks do not build those procedures for investigations they believe are cooling down. They build them for cases where they are expecting a moment, an arrest, a discovery, a development that will hit a family member in real time on national television. The protocol is preparation, and preparation means NBC believes this case is heading somewhere definitive. Ed Smart, the father of Elizabeth Smart, a man who understands at the deepest possible level what a family endures when someone they love is taken, appeared on News Nation and chose his words with great care. He said the Guthries have supposedly been cleared. Supposedly, that word is carrying a great deal of weight. It is the word of a man who respects the official position while keeping the door open to the possibility that it is not the final position. It is the word of someone who has watched enough investigations to know that cleared today does not always mean cleared tomorrow. Brian Entin told Parade magazine on May 3rd that cooperation between the Pima County Sheriff's Office and the FBI has improved. But a sitting county official publicly accused the sheriff of allowing personal feelings to interfere with the federal investigation. That accusation has not been retracted. This case is not going cold. Return to the beginning one final time. One word. Nancy Guthrie said no. She said no to a loan request from her daughter. And then, without anyone arranging a single safeguard to protect her, she said no to the caretaker that was never hired. She said no to the alarm system that was never installed. She said no to the camera subscription that was never renewed. She said no to the medical alert pendant that was never purchased. Every no left her more alone. Every no left her more exposed. Every no left her more reachable. And the last no, the one she said to her daughter, may have been the one that set everything into motion. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is still out there. Her pacemaker is still running, still counting, still recording every beat of whatever she is living through right now. She is a mother, a grandmother, a woman of faith who tended her garden and sat on her porch and went to church every Sunday morning and never asked to be at the center of anything like this. She deserves to come home. The people who know where she is, the people who sat at that dinner table, who took that drive in the dark, who made that phone call 7 minutes after arriving at her front door, who loaded those boxes, who are reportedly planning to move into a home whose owner has not been declared gone. Those people are running out of time. The DNA at Quantico is being processed right now. The 911 call is sealed and waiting for a courtroom to open. The 40 days of telemetric data from that car is in the hands of investigators. And here is what is coming in the next video. The pacemaker data, the specific readings logged in the hours after Nancy was moved. The timestamps investigators have had access to from the very beginning of this case. Because what that device recorded in the early hours of February 1st is not just evidence of where Nancy was. It is evidence of what was happening to her. And when those readings are laid out alongside the timeline this video just walked through, the picture they form together is something that no explanation, innocent or otherwise, has been able to account for. That video is coming. You need to already be here when it does.